evening, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Raw Prospect Podcast. Sunday, March 24th, 9:18 p.m. We're through pretty much weekend one of March Madness, and now we're into opening week of the 2024 MLB season as the Texas Rangers will begin their quest to go back-to-back as the Dodgers, Yankees, and many other favorites out there will begin their quest to get back on top of the world of baseball by winning this year's World Series. The season begins on Thursday. We've got some really good opening series to start out with. We'll get into that later on. But the way this is going to work is we're doing it a little bit different this year. Similar to the way our NFL preview went last year in a way, but a little bit different in terms of the format. We've ranked our top 12 teams. We got together. We have a top 12 list. We'll be doing 3 episodes here in the next week, 2 of which will occur probably tonight, with 4 teams in each episode. We'll go 12 through 9 in this episode. You can obviously see the teams there at the bottom that we'll be discussing. You're going to find them out anyway, so there they are. But the way it's going to work is we're going to kind of go debate style. So I will make an opening statement for the even number teams. Emmy will cross-examine me, meaning he'll ask me questions. He'll play kind of devil's advocate. And then he'll make his, statement on why that team, isn't on his concerns. I'll cross-examine him, and we'll do that for each team. We'll also make an over-under prediction just for fun for each team as well. So with all that being said, let's welcome in my esteemed co-host, ready for the baseball season himself, Mr. Emmy Nixon. How was your weekend?
It's been good, man. I'm tired, but I'm ready to go, man. We've been waiting to do this episode for a while now. And one thing I do want to clarify too is, in terms of our rankings, like if you're, disappointed on where your team is ranked, focus more on like us talking about your team rather than where they're ranked. We didn't. It's not like an exact science. It's more so we were trying to make sure that within these 12 teams, we believe is the World Series champion within these 12 teams that we're going to talk about. So, if you think your team is lower than what you would want, then just give us a chance. Let us talk about your team in depth the way we want to, and maybe you'll change your mind on how you view things.
Yeah, I think that's important to mention. The rankings are an exact science. We think these 12 teams are probably the best going into the season, but since we've made these rankings, there have been some moves. So if you have an argument for a team that's outside the rankings or that you think deserves more respect in this preview, tell us. Respectful minds can disagree. Okay, yeah. Let's get into number 12. Let's just go ahead and get right into this baby. Let me bring up the lower third for our first team, the Chicago Cubs. And I will start us off on this one. The Cubs, successful year last year. I think they overachieved on expectations. They went 83-79, and they were able to actually retain a lot of their bigger free agents in free agency. I'll get to that in a minute with the big re-signing of Cody Bellinger. They made some strides, 71-91 the year before, and they finished just one game out of a playoff spot last year at 83-79. A little bit of a sour taste in their mouth after a collapse. On September 6th of last year, the Cubs were in the second NL wildcard spot. However, they would lose 15 of their last 22 games to fall out of the playoffs. Kind of a disappointing into the season. Let's get to this year. I think they made a really shrewd move with the hiring of Craig Counsell away from a team in their division, a team that's pretty much owned that division here for the past half decade, and Craig Counsell. They bring him over from the Brewers. One thing about Craig Counsell is he's always had and been able to figure out pitching staffs. And I think that will bring solid value to the Chicago Cubs team. They dismissed David Ross from his managerial duties due to that collapse. He had some success in previous stints with different teams, but here's where the Cubs are. Um, Here's why I think the Cubs are legitimately like a wild card contender, and I think they can possibly win a playoff series. And then I'll let you kind of ask me some questions and give your doubts. First of all, I like their lineup. Um, Ian Happ is a really solid veteran. Contact bat has some power. Seiya Suzuki, who they signed before last year, actually had a pretty decent year one, and I'm anticipating a step up from him. Cody Bellinger in center field obviously was borderline MVP last year. They bring him back. He's in their 3-hole. Dansby Swanson at shortstop and Nico Horner at second base. I think potentially that's the best shortstop second base duo in baseball. It's at the very least top 3. This team is very strong up the middle, offensively and defensively. When you look at the catcher position with Jan Gomes, who's a really nice defensive catcher and can run into some power. Dansby Swanson and Dansby Swanson and Nico Horner. Nico Horner, who won a Gold Glove um, at second base last year in the National League. Really nice middle infield with Cody Bellinger in center field, one of the better center fielders in the National League. Really like this team up the middle, and all the teams that win the World Series typically, generally speaking, are really strong up the middle. Like their lineup. I like their balance of lefty-righty. I think Dansby Swanson's due for a big year. I think Seiya Suzuki's due for a step up. I think Cody Bellinger can play to like an MVP caliber level. And if he does, watch out for this offense. They also have some versatility. Now, their rotation. Justin Steele was excellent last year, and he has been for the past couple of years. I think he's one of the more underrated pitchers in baseball. There are questions in this rotation, though. That's where I get a little worried, and I'm sure you'll bring that up here in a second. They bring in Shoto Imanaga from I believe it's Japan, and he's kind of in a similar boat with Yamamoto of the Dodgers. It'll probably take some time adjusting to the major leagues, but if he pans out, he could be a really solid number 2 or number 3. Kyle Hendricks has proven he's been a really good pitcher for a long time. It's just injuries are a big question with him. Can he stay healthy? They bring in Jordan Hicks, who was a really good reliever for the Cardinals and some other teams for a long time. Moving him into the starting rotation is going to be interesting, but he could work out. He's just going to need to give them innings. And then Javier Assad, they're just hoping he can be like a solid 5. I do think they're going to get some reinforcements a month or two into the season when they get Jameson Taillon back. He's dealing with a back injury, and he's going to start the year on the injured list. And then to finish out, I think they improved their bullpen. That's another reason why I think this team can contend. They're in a weaker division. I'd say the weakest division in the National League. They add Hector Neris, who's been in big spots before, plenty of big spots. He'll be a nice setup man for this team coming over from the Astros. Won't be fazed by any big moments. I like Julian Merriweather, who's been good for a while. Adbert Alzolay, like him as their closer. It's just kind of the front end of that bullpen will need to stay healthy. But overall, I think it's a pretty well-rounded team. The questions come at kind of the back end of their starting rotation. And there are some other questions around this team pertaining to health and some other things. But I think the Cubs are right there in the NL Central.
Okay, yeah, I mean, a lot of great points there. To me, the first question obviously is in terms of their starting rotation. Like my question for you, in terms of my first cross X question for you, I think the pitching. Where do you think they will get is Justin Steele, do you think, enough to keep them afloat if they face, injuries on the lower end of their rotation? Like just the depth there, like what gives you confidence in terms of if, say, one of their new additions goes down in the latter half of the rotation, what gives you confidence that they'll be able to stay afloat?
Well, number one, experience. I do think Justin Steele, even if he's not what he has been past couple of years, where he was, I guess, one of the more underrated starters in the National League. I think Kyle Hendricks and Justin Steele, if they're relatively healthy and say they make at least 20 starts each, that would be, I think, enough to kind of keep this team afloat with the way that I think their offense could perform. The questions really are Jordan Hicks, who's nasty, has good stuff, but is taking a step up from a bullpen role to the starting rotation. Has started games before, but that's always kind of a big transition.
Right.
That's a lot of stress on your arm, going from 10, 20 pitches every night to 70, 80 pitches every night. I don't know how far he'll be stretched out. But what gives me confidence is they have like major league experience guys that have lasted through seasons before. And I think once they get Jameson Tyone back, hopefully in the first month or two, and they get a guy like Drew Smiley, who's been in games before and pitched for them last year relatively well. They do have some depth. Hayden Wesniewski is like one of their better prospects. I think it's not one of the better rotations in the National League, but I do think they have enough experienced guys and enough depth just beyond the bottom of their rotation to last. What's really going to take them to the next level, though, is Shota Imanaga. If he's what they think he is, they could be a World Series contender.
Right. Yeah. Honestly, I'm having trouble coming up with questions for you. I feel like you made a lot of sound arguments. I do think the Cubs' ceiling is kind of lower than some of the teams we're going to talk about here in a few minutes. Is why they're at 12, but I do think they're like I do feel pretty confident that they will win the NL Central. I think they're one main foe for that would be the Reds, and even then, the Reds are very young and very, relying on a lot of breakout from young pieces. So I think the Cubs are in a good spot, and I definitely agree with all the points you made. And I think with that, we can move on to move on to the over-unders.
Yeah, I'm taking the over on 83.5. I think this Cubs team will probably win it anywhere in between 85 and 87 games, and that might win you this division.
Yeah.
With the new balanced schedule in baseball that's been around, I think just for last season was the first year of it. It is interesting because you're playing all the other teams, and you're not getting as many opportunities to beat up on your own division. But I do view this roster as at least equal, if not better than last year, at least on paper, because they did add some pieces, although they did lose Marcus Stroman in that rotation. I do think, as I said, like Seiya Suzuki will be a better player this year. Dansby Swanson could play at it. I just love this team up the middle. Jan Gomes is a catcher that I really like. Garrett Cooper and Patrick Wisdom have been good in the DH spot. I do think they'll be anywhere in between 85 and 88 wins, and they'll probably win this division. I think winning the division and winning a wild card series would be a successful year for Chicago.
I agree. I would take the over, and with it being at 83.5, you're basically betting on whether or not they improved from last season. And I feel very comfortable with that. I just think this team has really found itself in the second half of last season. And I think there's no reason to from that point, they were very consistent. So there's no reason to believe that they'll just, have a random fall off. So I feel very comfortable with that pick there.
Okay. Our next team is the Minnesota Twins, and you are the advocate for the Twins, so go ahead and make your statement.
Okay. So for the Twins, so starting out with my research on the Twins, it's crazy because going into it, I didn't know what to think, but the more I looked into this team, the more I liked what they have built here. For one, last year they got the monkey off their back. They finally won a playoff series for the first time in 18 years, or let alone the streak was a playoff game. They won a playoff game and they won a series, which is huge for their organization. And moving forward, they have that momentum to be able to build forward from this point. The other key thing here as well is they have a rising young star in Royce Lewis. Obviously, Carlos Correa, Byron Buxton, those guys are extremely important to this team. But to me, Royce Lewis is such a key factor in seeing the full picture of how good this team could be this year. I think with him in the fold and him being a rising young star as a former number one overall pick, I think this team could be sneakily right up there in the AL come season's end. I think this is one of the most complete rosters in baseball. There's not a lot of holes here. For one, they address first base. Last year, they were second to last in defensive WAR from the first base position. They addressed that by picking up Carlos Santana, who is older at this point in his career, but plays elite defense and is a huge upgrade from that standpoint, along with all of the hitting that he brings to the table. I think had over 20 home runs in each of the last 3 seasons. Very consistent in that factor. And I think he'll bring, a key lefty hitter to the lineup as well. Or not lefty, switch hitter to the lineup that they've needed. I just think offensively, they have a lot of, versatility within their lineup. Whether it's, situational hitting for power, just hitting in the gaps, they have it all within their lineup. And that's what stands out to me. And then the pitching side of things, they have one of the best pitching staffs in baseball in the AL. Obviously, with Johan Duran being arguably the best closer in baseball, it's there's a handful of names you could throw in there, but he's in that mix, no question about it. And Pablo Lopez, of course, being their ace, being their key guy in that starting rotation. So to me, the Twins with Carlos Correa in his prime, still people forget that he's still just 29 years old. I think if they have health from Byron Buxton and key guys like that, I think their defense in the outfield and in the infield is just going to be on a higher level than it was last year. And I think with that, they'll win a lot more games than people are thinking. So I have I'm high on the Twins. From going through this process and seeing this roster, I think this Twins team could possibly, reach 90, 95 wins if things fall correctly for them.
So here are my questions for the Twins. We'll start in the rotation. I have no doubt that Pablo Lopez is a bona fide ace. He is, I wouldn't say the best ace in the American League, but he's probably in the top 10 of aces in baseball. He's performed really well, even with the Marlins. Before they made that trade, he was part of a really good pitching staff with the Marlins, and so I think that's good. Like, they have an ace. They have a guy that can go get you 6 innings, 1 run, 7 innings, 2 runs, pitch really well in a high-pressure spot in a game 1 or a game 7 of a playoff series. The last year they had Sonny Gray, and Sonny Gray pitched really well. They weren't able to bring him back. And so now my only concern is everyone else is slotted, I guess, a slot higher than I would like them to be. You look at Joe Ryan, who's been good, but now he's your number 2 instead of your number 3. Bailey Ober, who's young, I really like him. He's your number 4 instead of your number, or he's your number 3 instead of your number 4. And then Chris Paddock, who's coming off Tommy John and just returned in September, has been a good starter in, baseball for a long time, has had different stints. I believe last with the Padres, if I'm not mistaken, in the National League. No doubt he's like a good, experienced pitcher. It's just his only pitches last year came out of the bullpen, and now he's having to work back from Tommy John, which isn't always easy. I do like Anthony Desclafani. I always struggle to say his name.
Desclafani.
Desclafani. Yes. Yeah. I like these pitchers. I think they can be a good rotation. My question, I guess, is without like that. I mean, Sonny Gray at times looked like, I think he got Cy Young votes, if I'm not mistaken. Out of these guys like Joe Ryan, Bailey Ober, Chris Paddock, Desclafani, who are you? Like, who would be your pick? Who are you the most confident in, or are you confident in one of these guys over the others to become like that co-star to Pablo Lopez? Not that they're not good pitchers, they are. Right. But who's gonna step up to be that bona fide number 2?
Well, I think Bailey Ober is the key to this whole. I think best case scenario, he steps up and becomes that number 2, and most likely scenario, it's him and Joe Ryan as kind of your 2A and 2B type of roles. I think Bailey Ober obviously has to, gain that experience, and there's going to be a lot of like inconsistency that is involved with that. But I think in the regular season, I think you can work through those growing pains because I like what they have in terms of relief pitchers as well. So to answer your question, Bailey Ober is the one that I think is the key to bringing this rotation together, and definitely like losing. Sorry, I
Sonny Gray.
Blanking on Sonny Gray. Like it's a big deal, definitely, but they're moving more towards youth, and I think it'll be beneficial in the long run.
Yeah, I guess my only other question would have to do with, I mean, there's questions like this for every team, to be fair, but the key for me for the Twins, I guess I'm saying, is they need Byron Buxton to play like close to a full season, because that just hasn't been the case. And it's not their fault necessarily. It's just bad luck. But I think if he plays a full season, I do really like this Twins team. They're pretty complete on all ends. My only other question would be like Buxton and Correa, I think can play. They can hit a little bit better than they did last year. The Twins won the AL Central last year despite getting a combined 2.2 WAR in 220 games from Buxton and Correa. Like, Correa's great, no doubt, and he was good in the playoffs, but last year was not his best year just from a Carlos Correa standard standpoint. Neither was it for Buxton, but a lot of that had to do with injuries. Also, Correa dealt with like that plantar fasciitis last year, and Buxton's coming off knee surgery. So if those two guys can play like 120, 130 games each, yes, I like this Twins team to win. 95 is a lot. I mean, that's a big step up from 87. And the American League is tough. I would say 90, 92 would probably be the range I'm looking at for Minnesota.
I agree. I think I jumped the gun a little. I was a little bit overexcited, I guess. But
they could. Baseball is a fickle sport, but for realistic purposes, I think that's where we're at. Okay. Let's move along here. We're on a good pace so far. Okay, this team is interesting. This is the Toronto Blue Jays. They're our number 10 ranked team in our rankings. The Blue Jays, the story with the Blue Jays has been good in the regular season, good enough to get themselves to the playoffs, but have really fallen flat on their face when it comes to the past two postseasons. They have not, I believe they failed to win like a single playoff game in the past two wildcard series. They've gotten swept both times. So this team is hungry to get back, not only to the postseason, but obviously in a tough division. Maybe not as tough as some people make it out to be, especially last year with the Red Sox and the Yankees having down years. But they're hungry to get back. As I mentioned, they've lost 7 straight postseason games and 10 of their last 11 postseason games. But, I mean, you look at this team and you would think, like, oh my goodness, how are they not winning in the postseason? It's kind of weird. Well, let me get to that. Love this lineup. I do. I really do. I think this lineup can go. They're going to hit. It's just how consistent are they going to be? And will they finally take that major step in the postseason? But when you look at it, I mean, George Springer, Vladimir Guerrero, you add a guy like Justin Turner, who's just been a solid, really good, all-star caliber DH, third baseman, can play, has versatility. You slot him in to like the top 4 of your lineup, and he, I think, will be an RBI machine in this lineup as long as he is able to stay healthy. He is like in the twilight of his career.
Right.
But I do like that. Like he brings kind of like a veteran presence to a younger team, if that makes sense. Bo Bichette, really nice shortstop prospect. Love him on defense. But I'd like to see more consistency from him. But I love their top 4. I actually like the bottom of their lineup better than I have in past years. I mean, they made the trade for Dalton Varsho, who's a good left fielder, and he'll be in the middle of their lineup. This year, 5 or the 6 spot. I like him, especially defensively. I like Alejandro Kirk. He's a good catcher. Like from a hitting standpoint, he's above average for a catcher. He looks like a bowling ball, but he gets the job done. But I actually do like. It's true.
Yeah, I didn't know there's nothing wrong with that.
No, there's not. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, a lot of baseball players have been fat and made the Hall of Fame. So
Kung Fu Panda, now it's Kung Fu Bowling Ball.
Yeah, exactly. But in terms of, I like what they did. Like, I guess my original point is they have more like veterans in this lineup, which I like, especially for the playoffs. They added Kevin Kiermaier, who's been an AL East killer with the Rays for a long time, and he's still like a Gold Glove caliber center fielder. So they improved their outfield defense. They got veterans in this lineup. They have more balance. And despite not having that last year, they still ranked 8th in the American League in runs scored and 6th in the AL in OPS. That's not great. You'd like that to be better, and I think that will get better with these additions. That's what you're hoping, at least. And the hope is that Guerrero can have like an MVP caliber season, which I think he could.
Get back to form more.
The key driver for their success last year, though, was this rotation. In 2023, it was a rotation that ranked 3rd in Major League Baseball in ERA with a 3.85 and 7th in MLB in FIP with a 4.15. And this rotation is still very much intact, full of guys that were with this team last year. But the back end does have a major question mark. Alek Manoah was a guy that coming into last season was expected to be like a Cy Young candidate, and things just didn't go right for him. He had some injury problems, wasn't right the entire season, tried to rehab down in the minors, came back, and just was getting shelled game after game. And that really kind of drained a lot out of this starting rotation come playoff time because they did not have the ace that they thought they were going to have. But Kevin Gausman is a really solid number one and number two. Jose Barrios, his experience, has pitched in playoff games before, had a good year last year. Chris Bassett, who they traded for from the A's a couple years back, solid number three. I like Kikuchi as like a number four, number five. The big question with this Blue Jays team, in my opinion, is Alek Manoah. If he returns to 75% of what he was 2 years ago, this Blue Jays team could challenge for the American League East, in my opinion, if their lineup hits like we think it's going to. Because I like their bullpen. It was a strength last year. 3.68 ERA was eighth in the majors. So the pitching wasn't necessarily like a big concern last year. It was good, and I think it'll be good again. But they need Manoah to really kind of get back to at least like 75, 80% of what he was. And I'm sure you're going to maybe ask about him, but I do like this Blue Jays team. It's just that they're in a tough division, and they have like that one big question with their rotation. But other than that, I mean, they're a top three team in the American League East in my eyes.
Yeah, the Blue Jays made some splash moves for sure. I definitely you addressed it. The question that I was planning on asking you was, of course, about Alek Manoah, but my question is more so just last year. Do you think his struggles were more so like physical, or what? Do you think it was more of a mental? You know, that mental problem sounds really harsh, but like a mental block is more of what I'm getting at. Like, do you think it was more of a mental block that was affecting his play last year?
I think, well, first of all, a lot of the games I watched him, he was losing control of the strike zone. His fastball wasn't the same. That could be physical or mental. I think it probably some of both, to be honest with you. And when you don't have like your fastball and you can't hit the strike zone with your fastball, hitters aren't fooled by your breaking pitches because you just don't have a command of the strike zone. The breaking ball works best when your fastball, you can throw your fastball, your best pitch for a strike. And that just wasn't happening last year. He was walking too many batters, and that's recipe for disaster against a lot of the teams, not only in this division, but across the major leagues.
Yeah,
They're going to kill you if you give them free passes. So he just needs to kind of, I don't know if it was physical, if it was mental, it could be a lot of different things. But he just needs to find command again, command of the strike zone, and be kind of like the badass that he was 2 years ago. Where, I mean, he was going toe to toe with a lot of the best pitchers in the American League, including
yeah.
Garrett Cole. I mean, name someone, Justin Verlander. Like,
Yeah.
if he gets back to that, I like the Blue Jays. I think. And do you have any other questions before we get to the overall?
Well, my other question would just be, um, like this team. It seems like they have really extreme, highs and low lows, and they kind of just roller coasters. Um, but my question to you is, what gives you confidence in them in terms of sustaining high level play for the like at the right time is my main question. Like for that August, September, October stretch, um, like what changes did they make that makes you more confident in them being able to sustain that high level for that part of the home stretch?
I think it's probably the best answer I can give you for that is the veterans that they signed in their lineup,
Yeah,
Kiermaier and Turner. I mean, those are both guys that have, one's won multiple World Series and the other has been to a World Series. They also got Kiner Falefa, who they'll slot in the 9 hole, and will play some third base. You can move him around middle infield. It's not a great hitter, but he's a contact bat, and he can flip the lineup for you. So I do think Turner and Kiermaier will bring more leadership to some of these younger guys, and I do think they'll just be hungrier. I mean, a lot could go south for them if they don't end up doing something this year, like winning a playoff series. It would just kind of feel like a failure. I mean, the waste of 3 or 4 years with this spectacular young core. Um, I don't know if there's like a better answer for that. I guess. I mean, I'm pretty confident in their pitching. My one question for the Blue Jays is going to be like, aside from Manoah, is going to be how do they account for the loss of Matt Chapman? Matt Chapman was a guy who played third base for them last year and has been like a really good Gold Glove caliber third baseman at the hot corner for them for the past couple of years, and has been kind of that guy who's brought that veteran kind of leadership. He ended up leaving to go to the Giants, 3 years, $54 million. Kind of surprised he didn't re-sign with the Blue Jays, but I mean, that's 4.4 WAR that you're losing from last year. And that's, he was second on the team in WAR, just below Bo Bichette. So I think that could be something. Like, I do think they downgraded significantly at that position, going from Kiner Falefa from Chapman to Kiner Falefa. But I do think they made upgrades at other positions like Justin Turner and Kevin Kiermaier in center field that should maybe, I guess, offset that. You're going to have a weak spot in your lineup with injuries or whatever. Like, no team, aside from maybe, you can argue one or two, has like a complete top to bottom, really nice lineup. So that's the Blue Jays. Are we taking the over or under on 86.5?
If I could push, I would. Like, I think it's going to be like right on 86, 87, 85. Like, I probably would lean under slightly. But I do think they're just going to be right in the center of that wild card race. Like, I think they're going to be one of those teams that's fighting for I think probably the last wild card spot.
Yeah, I'm going to go under just because I don't want to go over for every team.
Yeah.
And I think they'll be right at 85, 86.
Yeah.
It's a tough division. The Orioles are good. Expect the Yankees to be better. We'll get to that later. The Rays, I mean, they always figure it out, right? So who knows? The Red Sox could surprise people. It's a tough American League. The Rangers, all that stuff. So I do think they could go well above that. Like, I think they're a team that could get 92, 93 if they really pan out. But yeah. Okay. Last team for this episode is Seattle Mariners. You have the floor. You have the floor.
Okay, so the Mariners, they, of course, missed the playoffs last year. Very tight race in the AL West between them, the Astros, and the Rangers. Just so happened to be the two teams they were battling in that division, just so happened to be the two teams that end up in the AL Championship Series. So it was a disappointing end to a really hot finish to the season. Now, the moves they made this offseason were I think, they removed some of the fat off of this team in terms of obviously salary cap. Like, they had a franchise record $123 million in I think team salary last year, and they've kind of lowered that quite a bit with some of the moves they made. But I think they've upgraded in a lot of spots where they're not going to have nearly as many strikeouts. Some of the players that they let walk or that they traded, a lot of those guys were very high in terms of strikeouts, and strikeouts kill, you know, kill innings, like leaving runners in scoring position. That's how they ended up with such a high WAR as a team without the wins to show for it. It's because they left so many runners in scoring position last year, and they addressed that in the offseason this year by bringing in glue guy type of pieces. I would describe it as, um, and I think in the end, I think it'll be beneficial. It'll provide more connectivity to this lineup, and the offense is going to be a lot more efficient because of it. You're not going to have, innings where you get three guys on base and then you have, with one out, and then you end up having two guys strike out in a row, and then you end up having three runners, left on base. Like stuff like that happened all the time for the Mariners last year. And I haven't even gotten to the pitching yet. The pitching is obviously the strength of this team. And I would argue, and I don't know if it's like really that controversial, they're easily a top three pitching staff in baseball. Like they are deep. They have the high end talent. Like it's a unit that's like I think has six guys possibly that could give them really productive play as starting. So really like this Mariners team. I think they made the right type of moves to help bring this team more towards the top in their division, to challenge those two teams at the top. And I think they're getting overlooked a little bit in terms of winning this. I think they could win this division. I really do. We'll get into the Rangers and Astros stuff later, but I just really do think the Mariners made the right type of moves this offseason to challenge those two teams.
They made shrewd moves, what they did. First of all, no questions pertaining to the starting rotation. They're kind of the first team on this list that doesn't really have a lot of questions that you can ask about their rotation. Luis Castillo, I would make the argument he's a top 3 ace in the American League on his best day. Just a really nice trade deadline addition for them. I believe it was last year or the year before. But then you go George Kirby, Logan Gilbert, Bryce Miller, Brian Wu. I mean, those are not only great young pitchers, but they've got nasty stuff. And I mean, that's like they're set for a 7-game series in terms of their starting rotation. Last year, they were 4th in MLB in starters ERA. They keep their entire starting rotation intact, and I think it'll be good once again. So no questions with their rotation. I like what they added to their bullpen. I think they got better on paper in their bullpen. Last year, they still had a good bullpen. They were 4th in MLB in relief ERA, although relief ERA can be kind of a fluky stat in my opinion, but I mean, it's still good. They were a good bullpen. They were 4th in relief FIP, which is a better, I think, indicator of bullpen success than ERA is. But they added guys like Gregory Santos and Ryan Stanek from the Astros, who's been in big spots before. Santos has been like a closer, I believe, for the Tigers and stuff. He's got, good stuff, good fastball, really good breaking ball. Add a guy like, Austin Voth, who's a right-hand pitcher, kind of can be that long relief guy for them. Something they really haven't had in the past. Like if a starter struggles, he can come in and give you 3-4 innings. So the pitching is really good, no doubt about it. It's top 3, top 4 in the American League. And if all this pans out, like the pitching could carry them potentially to a division title itself. But they are going to have Matt Brash and Santos start the season on the injured list, I believe, with injuries. So their bullpen will be kind of shortened to start the season, but I don't worry about that too much. And then they made shrewd moves in their rotation. I guess my big question is like, how big of a step can Julio Rodriguez make? Can he make the step to like being an MVP in the American League, in your opinion?
Well, I think the immediate answer to me would be yes. Like I the other day saw a graphic of his numbers in his first 2 seasons alongside Ken Griffey Jr.'s numbers. And I mean it's eye popping, bro. Like it really puts things in perspective. Obviously, Ken Griffey, he entered the league as a teenager, so that's definitely changes things a little bit. But the numbers that Julio Rodriguez has put up, I mean, it's been really, really good. And he hasn't reached his full potential yet. That's the scary part. I think obviously, like, I don't want to make like like confirm anything. Like we've done this before with, Fernando Tatis and Vlad Guerrero, where we're just like, oh, this is the year where he takes the next step, and then it just doesn't happen. But I really do think this is where he takes the step. Like, this is, I think he has the right mindset for it. You listen to this guy in interviews, you listen to him talk. He has the right mindset to do it. He has the right work ethic.
Yeah, I think he can, and I mean, I guess I really don't have a lot of questions with the Mariners. It's just I think
It's
about
just about just doing it.
I would say it's kind of about the bottom of the lineup kind of being better when they need
Yeah.
it the most. But I do like that they brought back Mitch Haniger. They added him back to this team, and he's going to hit like in the 7-8 hole for this team, and he's a good, solid veteran. You bring in a guy like Jorge Polanco, you steal him from the Twins. He'll play second base for you. He's good on both sides, and he'll run into power. Like, I think at
Right.
times they could have used more power at the top of their lineup, and I think now that they have enough of that, bringing in Mitch Garver, bringing in Jorge Polanco, and Cal Raleigh from the catching position, like, he can hit. So I think they are a pretty complete roster. The only real thing is, like, are they going to do it, and can they stay healthy? But
Yeah.
that's with pretty much every team. I like their over, to be honest with you. I like them to get over 90 wins. I think they're primed to do that. They kind of had
Yeah.
a disappointing into last year. They went I think it was 11-17 in the last month of the season. Not great. But I do think they'll be hungry, and I think they can get up there in wins in this division. They can compete.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is my most emphatic over. Like, I'm super confident in the over on this one. I just think if you told me that the Mariners had, 96 wins, won the division, I wouldn't be surprised. Obviously it would take a lot of things going in their favor, obviously. But they have the team to do it. And if you, I mean, I'm not saying they're like front runners or anything, but if you also told me, like, oh, this team, you know, is in the ALCS and with a shot at going to the World Series, like, yeah, I can see it. Like, this, as you said, this team is built for October, and they only had one shot at it in the past couple of years, and they ran into that Astros team a couple years ago, and I mean, people forget they played all right in that series. They didn't end up, they weren't ready yet at that point, obviously, but I think this time around, I mean, I just think this pitching is good enough to help them win a World Series. Like I really do believe that. Like I'm not. I don't know if I'm being like overly optimistic about them, but I just really think this team is built in the right way.
It's definitely built in the right way. The key for them is going to be, are they ready to pitch? Are they ready to be that team
Yeah,
against the Houston Astros, against the
yeah.
Texas Rangers in their
That's the
division?
real thing. Yeah, like they
That's
have
the
to challenge Titans in that division. So
yeah.
that's like
But yeah, I mean that's about it for this first part of our MLB preview. Um, with these four teams, so I took the over on the Cubs. I think they'll be in the 85-88 win range. I think they'll probably win their division. I think we both took the over on both the Cubs and the Twins, correct? Twins
yeah,
at 87.5. We both took the slight under on the Blue Jays. And we both took the over fairly confidently on the Mariners. But out of these four teams, you think you're highest on the Mariners, right?
yeah. I would say so. Definitely.
Okay, so hope you guys enjoyed. If you think one of these four teams should be ranked higher, or if you don't like one of these four teams and you have an argument for them not to be in our rankings, let us know. Also, let us know, regardless of whether or not you agree or disagree with the rankings, are you taking over or under on each of these teams' win totals? Leave that in the comments. And if you're one of these teams' fans, hope you guys have a really nice season. But with all that being said, that's
Oh,
going
did
to
you
do
want
it.
to talk about Shohei? Sorry.
Do you want to do that in this episode, or do you want to wait for when we get to the Dodgers, or does it?
Okay, yeah, you're probably right. We could probably wait for it'll probably make sense for that episode for
Yeah.
sure.
We'll talk about the Shohei story for sure. We'll talk about some other news around baseball. But for now, that's going to do it. We'll see you on our next episode, teams 8 through 5. If you enjoyed this, leave a like, subscribe, share it with your baseball fan friends if you have some. And we'll see you soon. Peace out.
Peace out.